So I want to go on now. I want to talk a little bit about financials, and the goal is not to go through the entire process of creating financials, but just to talk about what you need to have available. So first of all, when you build these things, keep it simple. I do a lot of financial modeling. Don't send me 31 tab spreadsheet with these deep involved stuff, because one, I'm not going to look through it. Two, I don't trust your math or your coding skills in Excel to think that all that math's going to work out, because markets don't work on math. So standard annual profit and loss, monthly P&Ls, monthly revenue projections, monthly expense projections, team projections, which is something Sharice really helped me understand better. So you will see this a lot on the coast when they want to know more about your team, and cash flow. So have these prepared, but don't go through them in the first meeting. Don't go through them. You can have a real simple summary of what you think you're going to do, but a slide that has a whole ton of numbers on it, one, it's boring, and two, it's not something you can deal with in 10 or 15 minutes. So the expression, the first meeting is like a first date. You're trying to get them interested in the first meeting, that first pitch. You're not trying to go through the process of naming the children. So from a financial forecast, I'm a believer you take the time and effort to do a realistic, detailed financial forecast. If you're pitching to me, I'm going to dig into your numbers. I'm going to flip to the second year of your business and ask you to explain the Q3 marketing budget as it relates to the Q3 sales budget, your sales expectations. And then I'm going to have you show me that you've got the right amount of headcount to execute the marketing that you have planned, and you have the number of salespeople you need to make it work. I'm going to expect that, because that's how real business works. So it has to be grounded in realistic assumptions. First 12 to 18 months is critical. You saw the Airbnb raise. They're looking to raise a certain amount of money to get down the road about 12 months to another milestone, right? It's not likely any of you are going to get to, on a startup, to profitability in 12 months. But if you're raising a 500K seed round to get to the next 12 months, you better have really detailed financials, because that backs up what you're using with the money. And there's nothing more frustrating than seeing a use of funds on the back of a slide deck. Slide 14 is the use of funds, and I open the financials afterwards and find out they don't match. And boy, you want a quick exit out of my group. Have your numbers not tie up to your slide deck. That'll get you out real fast. A 3-year forecast is normally sufficient. That's normal. I've read some really good blog posts from some of the best VCs in the world on why they want 5 years. And it comes down to, what do you aspire to? Because if your plan is a 20-year plan, you're outside the VC spectrum, right? They're not going to stick around with you for 20 years. They'd like to know where you want to be in 5 years. What do you think this can really do? What do you really think it could be if everything goes right? Obviously, and this is another point that I like to make, I've seen some people come in with 3 sets of financials: worst case, expected case, best case. I'm not a believer in that. I already know your worst case. You're going to go broke. Your company's going to be dead, and you're going to lay off all your people. Best case is going to be you've done what, I don't know what Airbnb has done, and just, or Pinterest, right? Just over the top success. None of those people thought it was going to go that far that fast, right? Can't believe they thought that. If they did, they're way more egotistical than I thought they were. So go with what you think you can do. And if it's a whole lot better, nobody's going to complain. Revenue assumptions. These need to be focused on monthly and not yearly numbers. Math. How do you get to the math? Sharice makes a good point that it's something that I'm learning more and more about is, if you've got a direct sales model where you're hiring salespeople, how many units, how many deals can each salesperson get each quarter, and how long does it take to train them? And what's the cost of supporting that salesperson? And that's all fine and good. Have you done anything to prove that? So have you put 2 salespeople in already, or 1, and proven that they can do 5 deals a month, 15 deals a quarter at an average revenue of X, whatever that is? If you're doing it with spend through the marketing, do it through, hey, if we spend $11 on a Facebook ad, we get 1 customer for this much revenue. Have a little proof on that, don't just go in with an assumption. And if you don't have your own numbers, go to a like company, a similar company, and find out what they're doing. Talk to other people in the startup world. So recurrence rate in SaaS models are everything. SaaS models are not easy. Software as a service are not easy models, but if you get them going, they're a money printing machine. There are 20-person companies that are making $100 million a year in revenue without a lot of problems, because people keep paying for their software every year, and it works. But you need to know the reoccurrence rate, and all those terms that Shrees was throwing up there with lifetime value and all those things, ARR and MRR. If you have to replace all your customers every year, it's a horrible business model, right? If every customer doesn't renew, obviously something's critically wrong. And there are some typical rates out there, and they're not 98, 99%. They're 60%, 70%. If you only have 14 customers and you have a 60% renewal rate, it better not be the top 3 ones you lose, or you're probably just lost half your revenue. So ideally, long-term, you can tie the revenue assumptions to sales marketing drivers. The more history you have, when people talk about traction, this is a form of traction where you can at least show getting people into your funnel. So you may not have people all the way to the purchase point, but you may already have done some tests in your marketing that you can go onto LinkedIn and do certain things and drive a certain number of people to a website who will then sign up for more information, sign up for a newsletter. That's a way of showing some traction. People care. It's a great way to test your message. Detailed revenue sources. With SaaS companies, there's the software as a service fee, but there's also sometimes hardware involved, believe it or not. Sometimes there is installation work involved, and sometimes there are service fees. All the different forms of revenue, don't forget those. We had somebody come in and pitch a company, and they literally had not thought about all the ongoing, there was a huge maintenance plan they could sell, and the customers would want to buy it. They just hadn't even thought about that. So think through the other aspects of your company. Expenses, pretty straightforward. If you do have costs of goods, some people do have direct costs of goods for manufacturers. Sometimes with service, SaaS-based companies, it's more about onboarding and support costs, or your cost of goods. If there's ongoing support related to your product, and there's nothing wrong with that, but just understand it's a cost of doing business, a cost of the product. Development and R&D expenses, break those out separately from sales and marketing expenses. The #1 reason startups fail is product market fit. That's the absolute blatant #1 reason now is product market fit. It's not running out of money. Running out of money is like #4 now. And so it's people putting product out there that isn't fitting the market. Could be bad sales, could be bad marketing, could be a bad product fit, pure product fit, but they're not getting the sales. So you really want to focus on that area. Operating costs are very straightforward, capital expenditures, etc. Know your gross margins and know what the gross margins are in your business. So if you're a SaaS company, know what the average gross margin is in a SaaS company. Subscribing to a bunch of to a Crunchbase newsletter, a free newsletter, you'll start to read a lot of this stuff. They send articles out that says, yeah, these guys pitched us, they had an 81% margin. You know, it's good to know that, right? And you can do some research on that. But it's something you need to ask about. Your team forecast, existing salaries, existing people, salaries, new hires, hiring dates, position and titles by department, and again, those departments I called out earlier, development R&D, sales, marketing, ops costs, you need to break them down by department. Don't just lump them all together. Don't forget about raises, and I'm also one about titles. It's okay to say my co-founder is a developer. And when somebody says, well, who's your CTO? I say, well, for now he's taken the role, and we're talking to our advisors about whether or not if he outgrows that, will he outgrow that? Should we strategically look at that? Great place to talk about advisors is you can also have an advisor CTO. Right? I might say, well, my developer partner's got 6 years of experience doing this kind of stuff, but we have made sure we have an advisor on board that's CTO to 3 startups. And she's helping us make sure we're making the right moves early on, and then we'll figure out if we need to hire somebody. Cash flow. Cash is your blood. You run out of cash, you die, you bleed to death. I'm not going to read through all these points, but the bottom ones. Have a detailed cash flow forecast of at least 90 days. I personally think you need a year. I think you're crazy if you don't have a year's forecast of cash. And boy, when somebody asks what your burn rate is, and if you don't know that answer, there's one of those things, if you don't know what a burn rate is, go look it up. The last point I'll make before we go into an example model is don't fall in love with your financial model. I've had people just kind of go down the rabbit hole of defining like 30 or 40 different versions of their financial model. You can spend eons in a financial model. You need to go out and sell something, right? The model is the representation of what you can make happen. And it's really easy to fall in love with a model. So I made up a fake company for the sake of a very simple example. We're going to talk about how much money to raise here, because that's the question of how much money do I need to raise? And so this is a way of backing into it based on what you're going to spend and what you think you can make happen. So I made up Next Gen Tools. They build a software as a service product. They have one product that's priced at $9.95 a year with a 90% renewal rate. Commission of 20% is paid on 70% of sales. So on 70% of their sales, they're paying commission. On 30%, they're not paying commission. The founder put in $100K and then raised $500K from friends and family. The CEO is taking a $2K per month salary for the first several years. So that's just the setup to this. Here's their hiring plan over time. Right now, development is partially outsourced. So what you're going to see in your book, and I'm not going to go through all this, but basically you're going to see that slide that says, here's that piece of paper that says, here's all of my hires. Here's what I'm going to bring in. Then the next pages, you're going to see basically a P&L at the top. Revenues, gross margins, all the pieces and parts down to the operating profit. More importantly, the cash flow. And if you go forward to the fourth page, what's happening is we forecast our revenue, we forecast our expenses, we forecast the team members we've brought in. And what you'll notice there is this is the point when our burn rate, let's see here, when our cash starts to come back up, if I remember right. Yeah. So cash has been going down here, right. So the change in cash is negative. This is when it starts to go back up. So when you're saying to yourself, how much do I need to raise? So he's put in 100 of his own, he's put in 500K from friends and family. He's obviously, this is a negative model. This can get to be a negative model. How much, where does the bottom, where's the bottom where the cash starts to turn and start to actually build cash versus burning cash? That will help you relate to how much do I need to raise. That's the number you're looking for, that beginning point. And in many cases, if you didn't put any of that money in, you would see you're like, okay, I'm still putting money in your model and start it. Just put on all your expenses and your sales. Well, I hit a bottom of I'm negative $350,000, okay, when I start to turn the corner. And that's when I start to cash flow month on month. And my burn rate is, let's make it easy, 50K a month. Well, depending on your sales cycle, you probably need to have 6 months of your burn rate in cash on hand just in case. So that's $180,000. Plus the $350,000 you're going to need to raise to cover all that shortage, right? So suddenly you're going, okay, I need about $550,000, $600K. Well, now you can put that in your model where on the time that you can see, okay, does that make sense? Do I, when I get to that bottom of the cash curve, when I'm starting to turn, do I have enough cash to survive a whole cycle failure? If you've got a 1-year sales cycle on your customer from first contact to actual cash in the bank, it's a year, you better have 9 months of cash in the bank. Because one hiccup, take the insurance industry. If you're in the health insurance space right now, and the federal government changes a little bit more and they start talking about Medicare for all, until that sorts itself out, nobody's going to buy anything. You just don't know what's going to happen. Economic downturn. There's talk of recession right now. It's just beginning. People are getting a little nervous about it. I don't know if we're going to have a recession, but in certain industries that are very sensitive to a recession, they're going to be very scared of that. Insurance isn't one of those, by the way. So that's the reason this is in there. It's not for you to go through and dig through all these numbers. It's to give you an idea of how you look for that point of inflection on your cash flow based on your model to help you determine how much do I really need to raise.